Hey, and welcome back to Wheat Beat. My name is Mike, and in our last video we talked about plumbing and I shared some videos and photos with you. Today we're talking about ventilation. Do we need a hood? Do we not need a hood? What if we do? What are the parameters? That's what we're going to go over today in part 7 on my series on building a micro bakery from scratch. So the topic of the hour is ventilation, and if you're following this series, you know I'm building a micro bakery right in my own house, and I'm bringing you along from conception all the way to the first baked loaf. Now, in the last videos, I went over the ovens I selected, the ABS dual deck oven and the Moffett turbofan convection oven. Feel free to go up to those links up above and see those past videos if you want to get caught up. Now, as you can probably guess, those ovens put out a lot of heat and also steam. My micro bakery is fairly small. It's only 200 square feet, so that's not a lot of space to absorb all that heat and steam. Now, I called around where I live and I talked to the city officials there, and there's really no hard and fast rule, at least in Idaho, about what you need to have in terms of ventilation for these ovens. There's really no need for any hoods over a convection oven, apparently, and that seems to be true among many jurisdictions, not just in Idaho. A deck ovens is kind of hit and miss. Some places do require a hood for that, some don't, but it only emits heat and a little bit of steam, so there's not a lot of strict regulation. But given the fact that my space is small and these two ovens put out a lot of heat, I've decided I do want some sort of a hood or ventilation system to exhaust all that, hot air out of that room. Incidentally, where the city said they do have a need for a hood is if I had a griddle or a fryer or things that were going to emit splatter or flammables that could potentially cause a fire. That's a completely different story, but if we're just talking about heat and steam only, the requirements are fairly lax. So I went back to ABS, the company that makes the deck ovens, and I asked them, hey, do you guys make anything for the oven that could help me with ventilation? And they said, sure, we make something called an eyebrow hood. This is what it looks like attached to the oven. It's basically like this giant box that has like a pipe on top of it, and then you pipe that through a duct out into the roof and it exhausts. And they make this thing, and it's great because it solves all my problems. But the problem with this thing is that, first of all, it weighs 600 pounds. I mean, look at the spec sheet on this thing. It is a beast, and it's not super cheap. I mean, you're getting this giant box, 600-pound box, and it costs about $1,000. So it's not cheap. But the problem with it that ABS told me about, the manufacturer of this eyebrow hood said, is that if this is really your only option, then go for it. But we don't think this is the best solution because it is attached directly to the oven. And when you turn on that fan to exhaust it, it creates some sort of a draft, air draft inside the bake chamber where you normally don't want air to move at all. In a deck oven, you don't have any air movement. So you don't want that fan to be pulling air out and creating some sort of like a vacuum and swirling air inside, because that's going to change the way that your products bake in there. So they say the best option is actually if you have a passive hood sitting over the top of these ovens, and then they just kind of collect the heat as it's emitted. Now, since I do have a convection oven right next to it, I think what I'm going to do is just have a big box hood sit over both of those passively, and then just let heat and steam rise up there without actually having anything attached to the ovens themselves. So now the fun begins. I contacted the HVAC guys, the people that do the heating and air conditioning for my house, and I said, hey, can you guys make me something, that like a box that sits over the top of this? I thought that's pretty simple. And they literally just laughed at me. I mean, they said, forget it, we're not touching that. We're residential people, we don't deal with commercial stuff. And I said, what's the big deal? It's just a box. And they said, well, as residential people, we have to take responsibility for this stuff, and you as the homeowner are going to walk in there when we're done, and you're going to look up and go, oh, I don't like that little connection right there, it doesn't look fancy enough to us, and then you're going to make us redo it, and we don't want to take any of that responsibility. And I said, of course I'm not going to do that. This is a commercial kitchen. I just want it to have a box with a pipe. And they said, buddy, we're not touching it. So that was the end of that. So the next thing I did was I contacted ABS again, the manufacturer of the oven, and I said, can you guys build me something, maybe like some sort of a box? And ABS said, well, maybe we'll talk to our machine department, maybe they can build you some custom box. And I called and I emailed them and they never got back to me. And I took that to mean they're just not interested. So the next thing I did is I actually went on the internet and I started looking around for hood manufacturers. And it turns out, lo and behold, there's a lot of companies that all they do is make hoods, custom hoods for kitchens. And I called and I spoke and I got information from different companies that make them. And I ended up settling on a company called Hoodmart. And I'll put the link down below. They're actually very professional and they had a lot of good information. They knew what they were talking about they had good reviews online. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. So we actually started talking about what kind of hood I need to make. And if you remember, we go back for a second about that eyebrow hood. Remember that eyebrow hood has sort of like this pitched area above where the doors are. And the reason that's there is so that when you open the door and heat and steam escapes from there, you want it to get caught in that hood, basically. So you wouldn't want that eyebrow hood to end before the door. Well, the same thing here with the hood. If you're going to build a hood, you want to make sure the canopy extends beyond where the doors are, so when you open them, all the heat and steam goes up into the hood. So it ends up being kind of a big hood for me. Remember, my room is 10 feet wide, and so that means the hood has to be approximately 10 feet wide. And when you take into account the size of the oven and you want it to extend past the door, that ends up being 63 inches deep or so, and that's over 5 feet. So 10 feet by over 5 feet deep. Wow, that's a pretty big hood. Now let's back up for a moment and just talk about hoods in general. There are two kinds of hood, ironically, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is the kind of hood you see in a big commercial kitchen. That's where they have deep fryers and griddles and things of that nature, and they splatter flammables. And what makes a type 1 hood a type 1 hood is that it has fire suppression systems installed in there, so that if a fire is created in some way, there is this system of pipes that basically blast it with water or fire suppression material and put out that fire. And that is a much more complicated, much more costly type of hood than the other kind, which is a type 2 hood. A type 2 hood is basically a box with a hole, and when heat escapes from there, it goes up into that duct and goes out to your roof, and you're done. So that's much less expensive, much less complicated, and thankfully that is what I need, a type 2 hood. So going back to Hoodmart, I gave them my dimensions. I want it to be about 10 feet wide and 63 inches deep. And I also wanted some lights inside the hood. Incidentally, that's not something that comes standard in a hood. You actually have to ask them to build that into the hood. So they actually are really cool. They put this package together for me. So they included the hood, the lights. They even put in this the fan that I'm going to need for it, and a control knob for the fan speed, and also a roof curb. A roof curb, just so you know, is basically just this metal box. Here's what it looks like. And it basically is what sits on top of your roof, and then the fan connects to that. And so it's the interface between the roof and the fan. Well, one of the things Hoodmart wants to know is the pitch of your roof. And pitch just means how much does your roof slant, so that when they put this roof curb on top of it, the fan will end up sitting parallel to the ground and not pitched like your roof. So you actually have to tell Hoodmart, what is your pitch? And I'm not going to get into that in this video. I would just go on a search and put in, how do I measure my roof pitch? But in my specific situation, I was lucky enough that I could see it right there in my plans, on the roof plans, which I'm showing you here. You can see that my roof is pitched at a 3/12. That's something that you can just look up and see how they measure that. But that's what it is, and that's what I gave Hoodmart, and then they gave me the corresponding roof curb to fit that. So I went ahead and placed that order for the hood, and then hopefully that will be on its way shortly. But as it turns out, everything here with this bakery is about timing, timing, timing. It's like they say with real estate, right? Location, location, location. Well, when you're building a bakery, timing is important, and it was really important here because the HVAC guys did not wait around for me. They went ahead and started installing the ductwork in my house. And at some point they came to me and they said, hey, we see on the plans you have some sort of a hood here. Do you want us to install a duct or not, before they close up the walls? And I said, yeah, I guess so. And I didn't know what to tell them to do. So I kind of thought, well, put in a 10-inch duct. That sounds like a fairly big, that's like almost the width of a piece of paper. Just put in a 10-inch duct there, and I think that will be okay. And then after they close up the walls, we'll connect the fan on the roof and the hood on the bottom, and we should be good. Well, no, it turned out it was not good, because like a few days later, I had done the whole thing with Hoodmart, and Hoodmart told me that for this size fan and this size hood, what you need is a 14-inch duct, significantly bigger.
HVAC went ahead and installed this 10-inch pipe, but I'm starting to think that we're going to need a 14-inch pipe. So we'll see how that's going to work out.
So now I'm stuck with this 10-inch duct, and I'm going to need a 14-inch duct. And then when I talked to the HVAC people, they said they're going to charge me $900 to take out the 10-inch duct and put in a 14-inch duct. And I said, come on, you guys, are you serious? And they said, whenever we do a demolition and a redo, that's how much we charge. And I thought, okay, you know what? I'm just going to leave this thing, and then I'm going to find the solution for installing the hood and the fan, and then maybe I can just have them swap out with a 14-inch duct for significantly less. Anyhow, altogether, the roof curb, the fan, the control, the fan itself, the box itself, and the lights and everything else was about $2,500. Wow, yeah, that's a lot of money for sure. But don't forget that that also includes tax, and that includes freight. Now, freight is a big deal because this thing doesn't come in UPS. I mean, they have to bring this in with an 18-wheeler. And I mean, this is just installing this thing, getting it in the room. I mean, that was a whole nother adventure. And I'm going to save that for another video because I don't want to completely bore you with all of these details in one video. So I'm going to cut it off right here. Next time, I'm going to show you how it went with getting this thing delivered, getting it installed. What a saga, what a saga. And we'll go over that next time in the video. That will be a fairly entertaining video, I'm sure. And also they're getting some of the electrical stuff finished up. They're going to put in insulation and drywall now. So things are really coming together. It's starting to look like a bakery. So don't forget to subscribe to this channel so that you can find out when I upload new videos. And until then, go bake something.